Hey everybody, it's Nathan with the Birds and the Lees. We are back once again, and it's like day 100 of the Corona quarantine. And I have to tell you that we are ready to get outside a little bit more.
Yep.
But I'm here with Kim. Kim's my wife, and if you have been listening up to now, you know she's really awesome and has many wonderful insights. And we have been on a journey of telling our story. Kim is been with me for 15 years. We've been together. In fact, I would say for almost all of that 15 years, we have been married. Actually, 16 years now.
More than the 15
More than
years.
the 15. Yeah, 16, because we were dating for a year, pretty much, or we met a year before. But if you've been following what our story has been, you know that it has been one with a lot of ups and downs. Sometimes it felt like a lot of downs. And, you know, what in fact, we actually sat down and talked about this today. What we want to do is, obviously, we've said from the very beginning, we want this to be something that is relatable to those who are in the same position we are, and that is a family and ministry. But as we continue to tell the story, you know, obviously stories can tend to get really long. And, you know, our purpose is not just to tell the story. It's to go back and reflect upon the individual pieces and give an opportunity for both of our voices to be heard, and for those listening, if you are, to interact with that. And, you know, we're getting kind of almost to the point where we're caught up with where we are today. But if you were with us last time, you heard that you know, basically we moved to Pittsburgh, and we had, you know, been in ministry for many years. Well, not many years, but almost 10 years. And then we go for this dream job, and we face quite a few trials in the middle of it. You can go listen to those in more detail, including the death of a parent, and then ultimately me losing my job. Kim, looking back on, you know, kind of what we've done before, is there anything you want to add to that? I mean, are there any thoughts looking back as we've been reflecting through this story, kind of feelings or, you know, things that have come to mind? Because I know we're going to get into more of those details, but like right now, just sitting here, you know, where are you at with all of this?
I mean, you're never over something, right? You're never necessarily past it. But I think I knew we were in a place when we started talking about it and accepting our wrongs in those moments. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's a point where, you know, obviously you can get into a mode of, I don't want to say, maybe bitterness is too strong of a word, but yeah, maybe it's bitterness where you see others as the sole source of the issue. But, you know, we had our own part to play. And in fact, we even said that in the midst of me losing my job, the statements that were made of, well, it's not really anything you did wrong, those were difficult because at times we were looking for a reason. We were looking for why did this happen? And that was really difficult.
Yeah. As a family, we always strive to be better people, better in ministry, better in relationship, better friends, better children, whatever we need to be. We try to strive to be better people.
Yeah.
And when you have nothing to look at and say, well, they said we were too cynical. I'm only saying that because it has been said of me.
Yeah. I mean, well, we've all had things said about us.
That, you know, with no goal to change, there was nothing to make better. So the only thing we could make better was what we did moving forward. Yeah.
We had kind of had to come up with it on our own. And where our story picks up is, you know, we've left. Yeah. Ultimately, we've left. And we were sitting there chatting today, and I said, you know, it feels like there's two parts to our whole life story. There's everything before 2011 and up to 2011, and then there's everything after.
So 5 years-ish.
5 years-ish, and then there's 10.
Yeah.
Where we are now.
And I think it's important to denote the length of time it took us to even get to this point, which was twice as long as it took for us. It took us twice as long to recover as it did for all of this to happen. Yeah,
and I've heard that before. I've heard that sometimes the recovery is much longer. And by recovery, you know, like you said, the hurts don't ever fully go away. There's things that remind you. There's things that you see, and, you know, part of that's been the issue with social media. I can remember immediately after all that happened, you booted me off social media because every time I got on there, it was just a reminder. And it was pretty brutal to see the things that we did and be reminded of what happened. The good news is, you know, we get to this point in which we'll get in a little detail in a minute about what happened, and it feels very far away.
Yeah.
To me, I don't know how it feels for you,
Yeah.
but it feels very far away to me.
Most of it does. There are some of the scenarios that feel awkwardly close as well when we talk about scenarios at church that we're trying to fix or, whatever. Those can get eerily close.
What do you mean by eerily close? Like getting close to what that felt like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as, when we deal with someone that's struggling or having a really hard time, and it reminds me of somebody from that church, sometimes those emotions will get stirred up.
Well, I could even tell. I even know that for you and myself as well. Sometimes statements are made that sound very familiar to things that were said.
Yeah.
Even in full disclosure and honesty, you've actually had conversations with staff at the church we're at now, been very open, and they're very open staff, which is awesome. It's the most transparent and open staff I've ever been a part of.
Right.
And that's a huge blessing for us. But you've been able to walk in and say, hey, look, when you say these things, this is where my gut immediately goes. And to find that kind of reassurance and, the truth is that's not where we're going with these statements, but we get and understanding where you're coming from.
Right.
I'm hoping that as people listen, maybe even people who were a part of that time in our life, if they listen to this, at least they can understand our side of it. They may not agree, but at least they can understand the perception we had.
Or maybe even understand the church's end of it.
Yeah.
I don't
understand what portions, could have been done differently.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, I know you have a very strong desire for churches to realize you don't want to make those same moves that way.
Yeah.
I'm really like, I just want you to know what it was like for us. There's a part of me that's like, and maybe that's just our different personalities.
Yeah.
I just want people to have well, it's not empathy. I can't think of the word. Is it empathy? To kind of relate to the feeling, or it's not sympathy.
Yeah, but you're talking about it from a point. It's almost like a wisdom.
More experiential. Like, do you understand
wisdom,
what we experienced in that, and how whatever decisions were made can play into that? But I think that's
certainly part of the reason we started this and even went down this road is because when we got let go, we're on the way back, we're trying to find resources for some kind of encouragement or support, or is there a group we can be a part of? What book do I need to read? Who can I talk to?
And there really wasn't anything except there was one doctoral thesis.
Yes.
Thesis at Dallas, the guy wrote for Dallas Seminary that was about the epidemic of pastors being fired. And the stories, what was interesting was the stories were way more horrible than ours.
They were awful.
They were terrible.
But at the same time, it gave us complete compassion for if what we went through was, let's say, on a scale of 1 to 100, a 70.
Yeah.
And what they went through was at 100. Well, who are they going to?
Yeah, who are they going to? And even in the midst of things being worse, one story's worse than others, there were a lot of common threads in that, and especially in how they felt and responses and what they struggled with.
Yeah.
And so you're right. You look and go, well, who are they talking to? Because, everybody's writing the book about how to make a great team and who you got to let go, but nobody's really writing the book of, okay, what if you find out you're the guy that they decide is not the guy on the team?
Right.
Where do you do? What do you do? Yeah. Because the assumption is when someone is let go from a team, they're totally oblivious as to why, there's kind of this, they cease to be a person, even when you talk about them in the leadership books, right? Mm-hmm. The John Maxwell books and stuff. When they talk about the person who doesn't fit on the team, sometimes it can come across as like they're the bad guy.
Yeah.
And we got to get rid of them because it's almost like they're a Batman villain.
Right.
The person who can't work on the team. But sometimes the person who's not on the team anymore is just someone who thought they were doing their best, who thought that they were working as hard and just really wanted to, and they suddenly find out that they're out. They're on the outs. And I think that's the book that somebody needs to do. Of course, you're pointing at me, at us, both of us. Somebody needs to be able to sit down and sit there and say, hey, you know what? There's definitely a need for people to learn. Like, when you are that person, you're not just a faceless entity. You're a person who has a family, or
even when you quit ministry,
right? Even when you quit,
the support that can be lacking. I can't even begin to count the amount of pastors that have stepped away and felt completely isolated based on a decision that they made themselves, and everybody still loves them, but to integrate back into mainstream work is hard.
Yeah, to go from ministry to
Yeah.
the corporate world, or however you want to say it,
Yeah. And there are no
private sector, maybe is the way you say it.
Yeah, there are no there's nobody out there that knows how to do that. It is very frustrating for the average pastoral person
Yeah.
to make that change.
Yeah. So, well, we are going to go ahead and get into the last. Well, not really the last. I mean, the story obviously is going on and on, but it's
Right.
the next step. And I think over the
Yeah.
next couple episodes, we're going to kind of bring us back to where we are now. I think this was good to kind of reflect a little bit on where we are in telling this. But
Yeah.
if you were with us last time, we left off with, basically we're driving back. We decided
Yeah.
we were going to go to Flower Mound, and
That was
sorry.
that was the trip where Garrett
Yeah, our son had a
Squished.
meltdown with a applesauce packet and squirted it on the ceiling, which was one of the funniest things.
Yeah.
But again, those moments, things like that, that's what we needed.
Yeah.
I remember those things. We laughed so hard because there was so much hurt.
Yeah.
And then we talked about I had to go back, and I remember going back and getting the rest of our stuff except for the chair that I left. And that drive, it was funny. I listened to one song on the whole drive back, and it's a song that it's not even really one of my favorites, but I listened to it. But I remember sitting in the hotel. We had the dog with us, and
Yeah.
Jessica and Garrett, and my dad's driving the truck, and we're with my mom. It was just such a surreal moment, but it was good because we spent a lot of time talking.
Yeah. It was a lot of time on the road.
Yeah. It was a lot of time on the road. And then, I'm coming back hoping to get a job at the Apple store. That was my big plan,
Yep.
because I couldn't find anything else. It was like, the best I can do. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
bashing the Apple store, but, and spoiler alert, I didn't get the job. I actually, they hired a woman who called it the Apple phone
Yeah.
over me. But mostly that's going to lead into one of the things we discovered. And I think it's a good topic for us to talk about down the road. You too have a lot of input, and that is that transition. How do you go from being a pastor and sitting there trying to explain to someone, hey, the things that I did as a pastor, they translate into these
Right.
other jobs.
It's a job like any other job.
And that's hard. And then you're sitting there going, okay, I've been a stay-at-home mom for 3 years. Well, I've been a stay-at-home mom who's been taking care of my father.
Yeah, I never really got the chance to stay
At home.
Yeah.
But you would be considered that by others. But really,
Right.
let's say this: you were non-formally
Non-paid.
employed.
Yeah, I was
non-formally employed.
Non-formally employed. Mhm.
But now we've got to be there.
Yeah.
We have to do that. And what was because you took a big risk at this time. You took a big risk.
Yeah. So, when we got back, essentially pretty like within 9 months, got my real estate license and jumped into that. And for those of you who are outside of the state of Texas, real estate is basically a contract labor, and you have no insurance, no health care. There is nothing that you would get at a standard working position, no 401k. But I was of the mindset that if there was a time to try, it was now.
Yeah, and I remember you coming to me and asking me, and this was an interesting place to be because this was my thought process was, well, if you believe you can do it, then I trust you.
Yeah.
And I think I remember saying, you followed me all over the place. It's my turn to do that.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find anything.
Right. And so you were home anyways at weird hours, and it really didn't matter what hours I worked because you were
Yeah.
home. So it really was, as far as hours wise, a great choice at the time.
Yeah, it was. And I was able, it was a good time for me because I spent a lot of time with the kids. I spent a lot of time taking them to school. We got Jessica plugged into school. She got her kindergarten year, which was odd because she was in kindergarten nowhere. Well, she missed the first semester because we moved in with your mom.
She did.
And we were living in an area of Dallas where we weren't going to send her to public school necessarily.
Right.
But it was good family time. I mean, we spent...
such good family time.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost...
it's kind of a lot like being quarantined, right?
Yeah, we were definitely quarantined, except it was a little bit different. They were littler, and we
Yeah.
could do things like we jumped in the car and drove to Colorado for 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
And hung out there at the cabin.
Yeah, we had some really neat
Yeah,
memories come
and
out of that.
just be together and feel like we'd been together for the first time in 3 years. And I think there was definitely I don't like the term soul care because it sounds kind of cheesy to me, but
Yeah.
that's really what it was. I
Yeah.
mean, it honestly was, is we were just getting some time to, be together and reflect. But at the same time, I'm looking for a job and I'm getting
Yeah.
turned down like
Time and
time again. Any job I
Yeah.
could find. Now, I did get a job at Lowe's working the loading dock, which was fun.
And Academy.
And Academy, that came later. But I remember sitting there, those kind of hands-on, they're retail jobs. Lowe's was less of the retail side and more of just the driving forklifts. And that was good. That was fun. And,
Yeah.
it just didn't pay enough. That was always the issue. It was just you couldn't get the pay. The insurance took forever to
Yeah.
get. We were paying out the nose for it.
Ugh.
And, I think ultimately, we were blessed that God allowed you to do the real estate. And
Yeah.
to be honest with you, you did really well.
I did.
I think
Yeah.
you took off right away. Now, you did new home sales for your mom a little bit. Or no, with
Yeah,
another
that's-
company.
Yeah, with another company. And that's a whole other story. But
And that's not the best schedule for a mom with kids.
Yeah, you got to work weekends and
Every
nights
weekend.
and every weekend. You never get a weekend off. You don't get many holidays
Yeah.
off. Yeah,
Yeah. So, I mean, but you're doing well. I think you launched very well.
yeah,
And, ultimately we moved back up to where we were from. And we got a rental home, which was great. Had a great landlords who loved us. And we
Yeah.
thought they were awesome.
they were very sweet.
And we were able to kind of stabilize a little bit. I remember we got a house because
Yeah,
we felt like that's, this goes back to the story about the playground,
yeah,
the playground in our yard. We wanted something to give our kids somewhere
Yeah.
to just say, hey, we're finally here, because
right.
we figured out that how many times did we move since we got married?
Oh, I mean, those first 5 years, it was like 13 times
Yeah,
or
we
something.
moved like 13 times with
Yeah.
with two kids.
Mhm.
One of them not really aware because he's so young, but the other, she just didn't get used to being in a place. And we've said that this second part of the journey is kind of the healing part. It's the recovery part. But at first it doesn't feel, I mean, it feels, there's kind of a deep breath, but then it's like, okay, well, now there's this other set of issues we've got to deal
yeah,
with.
yeah.
There's a whole other set.
The emotional set of issues of moving past the pain
Yeah.
and starting a new life. We went from trying to engage in a church full time
yeah.
to not having a church.
Yeah, I mean, we went to my dad's church for a little while, but that was a long drive for us. And
Yeah.
I do think one of the things I appreciated was, I was out. I didn't want anything to do with, and he kind of did the dad thing where he's like, well, no, you're coming to mine, and we're gonna give you opportunities to teach and things
Yeah.
like that. We need you to stay. We need your skills to stay honed in doing that, and I appreciate that because it did ultimately. I think that was part of that process of healing, but. I didn't want anything to do. And at the same time, what we said earlier, I'm on social media seeing the people who took over for me and feeling like, those who had built a relationship, with the exception of like one or two, felt like you were easily forgotten. I was like, okay, I've got 3 years in with these people.
Well, let's be very real that forgetting our address 6 months in a row to get us documents that we needed, they would call you every month.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
We were definitely
I had forgotten about that. You remember that stuff. I don't. But I think for me more, it was just feeling so abandoned and just like misused and really like feeling, worthless and as a failure. Now, I have two very close friends who were here. This was another interesting factor. We moved back, and after 3 years, even our former students, everybody's moved on and gotten their own life, which you
graduated,
can't blame them.
gone to college. Yeah.
It's totally understandable. They've gone off and lived their lives, and you've missed part of that.
Yeah.
And so there's this weird airlock kind of. I'm going to be nerdy for a minute. There's a great book called The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, and it talks about a guy going to fight war in the future. And every time he goes out to these planets, it takes him years to get there and years to get back. So every time he comes home, everything's different. Everything's different, and it's a metaphor for Vietnam. But people come back and relatives are gone or friendships are gone, and that, in some ways it felt like that. We're coming back and people have their own new circles, and we're not in that anymore. And I remember you and I having long conversations where I struggled with that hard.
It was really lonely. I mean, I have one sweet friend, Christina, that we really have been tried and true for
many years. Yeah, I
years
mean
now.
it's been a while.
And we're not, we don't have to talk every day, but when we do, we laugh and we cry and we, but it took a while to get those kind of friendships.
Yeah. And I obviously have my own. I'm terrible at keeping up with people, so I have to also take my own responsibility in that because I'm not really good at that. It's just not how I'm bent, and so I've lost contact with friends, and I regret that very, very much so because we were so close. But I just remember almost feeling very foreign being back here, like you're in a whole new place, and it's not home necessarily. And you're trying to find that place you're going to land. And in the middle of that, you're looking for a job. You've got a new career, so everything's new to you.
Yeah. It was a stressful time.
Yeah. You're meeting new people. You're doing well. I remember those days. I mean, I was working for you until you fired me. And then, that didn't go over so well.
Yeah.
We don't work well in a corporate kind of sense together. We're better in ministry together than we are in a job. Of course, ministry is a job. That's a silly thing to say. But anyway. So we're, I don't know. You talk about the emotions of it, and I feel like there was this exciting thing for you, but you were balancing that with the feelings, and I'm just going to say it, feelings of betrayal, because that's the only way I can describe what you were feeling, and from my point of view.
I think I was still kind of frustrated, saddened, mourning my dad, and to have that put on top of it, I really didn't deal with it for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
I would say the first church that you got a job at, I don't know if we can say names.
Well, you mean after we got back?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was another step in the healing. That was great.
Yeah. I definitely think that, okay, so we got back. You kind of went back and forth between a job or two.
Yeah.
And then
minimum wage jobs.
Ended up at a great church locally. And I really believe that we were put there to heal.
Yeah, and kind of a out of the way kind of way to get there, and doing a job that I never thought I would have done, and that was working with children. I mean, I've been a youth guy, and I find myself in a situation. I remember when I was applying for that job, and I brought it to you, and it was mostly curriculum writing and creative stuff.
Yeah,
it wasn't being the children's pastor. It was being a part of the team.
Right.
I wasn't the guy leading the team. I was just part of the team, and I brought it to you, and you said, "Oh, you'd love this. This is what you need because you don't have to have all that weight on you." And I think. What that did was gave me the reflection time of the mistakes. Even when I was interviewing for the job, and they'd ask me, hey, you got, this was what would you see you doing now? And it's like, look, I made a lot of mistakes that I finally addressed and figured out what they were, and this is my chance to make up for them.
Yeah. And
I think that was what that did, and continuing to learn, because I don't think I'd be where I am now if I had not been there first.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have been able to, because I learned a lot of very valuable things. And I think for you it was good because they were they were almost the exact opposite in terms of staff families that the previous place was. I mean, 180 degrees. You were welcomed, brought in, loved on. The kids were. I mean, it was just this completely unique situation. And in fact, leaving there was very hard.
It was real hard.
It was real hard. It was the time, but it was really hard. And I remember sitting there thinking, in a church with a massive staff and having all these people in one room appreciating your time. And you weren't even in like the top leadership, but appreciating what you were doing.
I was like, you on that staff would have been considered like 4th tier, and they didn't see a difference in that versus when you're talking about pastoral admin.
If you had a flow chart, right? I'm here.
And all
wherever
churches
that
do.
is.
That's natural, and it helps.
It's not a minimization of the person. It's just where you operate.
But to feel that, to see the tears because we were leaving, and they knowing that we were doing it to bring the kingdom more people.
Yeah, we wanted to step out because it was time, and we needed the opportunity that God was leading us into, and He was very clearly showing us that. And that's kind of where we land where we are now. But even then, those first couple weeks at the second church were still many of those feelings.
Yeah.
That what you'll find in this story is that interestingly enough, that 1 year where all of that happened, or 3 years really, but the 1 year where everything just kind of collided, it marks everything so much that it's reflexive. Your reactions to it are just so natural that when you hear, the hurt, it comes out so quickly. It doesn't happen as much anymore, but when it does, it's like boom,
Right.
And that's difficult, especially when you're wanting to be able to step up and serve others when you really need to be, in some ways there needs to be some care done for you.
Right.
And I think that's what's been so neat about the place we are now is just the honesty and encouragement, not just, hey, you're doing a great job, but speaking directly to you in an honest way of saying, this is what you need to know, right? This is where you have value, and you need to know word for word specifically what it is. And I see them do that for you too.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I don't know that I've ever been a place I'm comfortable enough to say, to look at the lead pastor and say, I need you to be my pastor for 30 minutes.
Yeah. And I remember that conversation. It was such a cool conversation to be able to walk in and go, I'm not Nathan's wife.
Yeah.
I'm a person in your congregation and I need to talk to you.
Yeah.
Because this is what's going on in my life. And to have him listen
right.
in the way that he does that he's so good at, it just puts us in a really unique place, even more so now that we can look back with a more objective viewpoint. Go, okay, yeah, that's
right.
And now we see situations pop up where stuff we learned, previously, we can go, okay, yeah, we're not going to do that in this new situation that is now, we're now on the other side of that.
Right.
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 We're going to handle it differently. And I think, as we start to wrap up our story, the story's not really done.
No. Well, I mean, it's never done.
But even the stuff we've already talked about is not necessarily done in this podcast.
No.
Because what we want to do now is, in the coming episodes, what I want to do, especially with Kim, is I want to go back and pull out some very topical things that I think are the themes that run through this whole story.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily cutting us off right now tonight, but we're going to go back and go, okay, so let's talk about loneliness.
Yeah, and we're going to start having some guest speakers.
Yeah, we want to have some guests on.
We want to really get to a point where people can say, gosh, I'm really struggling. Ooh, I really slaughtered that word. I'm really struggling.
It sounded right to me. I don't know.
You'll hear it when you listen it back to it. I'm really struggling with having a friend at church.
Yeah.
How can I go about that? How do I maneuver that?
Yeah, because even you can have friends, but you're always still the staff wife.
Right.
Right,
and you always know more than everybody else.
You do.
So
you know
they
more.
Think.
So they think you know more than everybody else.
Yeah.
But even then, when it's time to go,
yeah.
Do the relationships sever? What do you have to do to try? When do you try to keep it maintaining them? Because, now you got to put all this time into these other relationships because you want those to be healthy. So,
yeah.
I think that's been, especially for you, has been a big theme of just that. Yeah. Where do I fit? Where's my puzzle piece go? Because there's a certain amount of loneliness in that. Yeah. But, I think that's a good turning point because, we go through this. And I think more details of the story will come out as we talk about those topical things, how we felt and situations that came out that really identify those things. For me, the moment I, okay, yeah, there is some insecurity. So if someone says X, I'm going to, inside crater because X sounds like this over here. And, we'll get into that. So do you have anything else? Any more thoughts on tonight?
No, it's a good end. But
I think it's a good end.
I think we probably need to start getting some speakers lined up.
We do. I've already got 2 in mind. So yeah, we need to get some guys and women in here to share with us because there's a lot of people who are experiencing the same thing.
Yeah.
And so, hey, we really appreciate you guys continuing to listen. We know that you guys are out there because we see it in all of the listening threads that people are actually following along, which we love. If you want to leave us a message, you can do it, like say on iTunes in the comments. We'd love to have some comments. We'd love to hear your feedback. Kim's going to be working on getting a Facebook page up that starts to promote this even more. But we know we're getting the hits, and we really appreciate that. But you can email us at podcastinglees@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. Let us know what you're thinking. So until next time, this is Nathan.
And this is Kim.
And we're the Birds and the Lees, and we hope you have a great quarantine.